Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I'll be your host. This week, it's just the two-man game, me and Scott. Scott, how you doing this evening?
I'm good, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all good. It's a bit windy and blustery, so apologies if it sounds like a storm's coming through my microphone, but mental outside. It's been mental in the Belgian Pro League as well. You also will be gutted to be missing this one because so much has happened once again. We've got new managers all over the place, so we're going to be kind of going through that. And some places we haven't got new managers, we've just got gone managers and kind of no one's replaced them. Let's quickly go through the results from this weekend before we dive into all the games. Genk won again. They beat Mechelen 3-1 despite being down to 10 men. Zultevar again, they weren't able to win going down to 10 men. They lost 3-0 to Standard Liège. Westerlo and Sint-Truiden played out a quality kind of back and forth game. That one finished 3-2 to Sint-Truiden. Kortrijk drew 1-1 with Cercle Bruges. In Bruges, Club Bruges beat Oostende 4-2 despite kind of throwing that one away a little bit. Anderlecht, they beat Eupen 4-2 at home. Selang lost 2-1 to Union at home. They still just can't do anything at home, Selang at the moment. Leuven came back to draw 1-1 with Ghent. And then Charleroi got a win against Antwerp, who lost again. Let's start with the league leaders then, Genk, and it was Walter Rankin against his former side. He got a great reception from the Mechelen fans, as you could probably expect. And his side gave him a great reception, getting off to a perfect start. Daniel Munoz, lovely 1-2, marauding into the box before finding the bottom corner to make it 1-0 to Genk. However, Mechelen equalised. Rob Skuse scored another goal from outside the box. I feel like that's what he does exclusively. Finish into the top corner, which made it 1-1. Into the second half we go, and it's the other fullback this time we got on the score sheet, Gerardo Arteaga at the back post to finish off across along the goal line, basically. Almost missed it, actually. Couldn't have almost sent it wide of the other post, but he did get it in. So it's 2-1 to Genk at that point, and then Bilal Kanous, he got his second yellow card in the 64th minute to bring Genk down to 10 men, and at that point it was basically Mechelen with the ball, most of the possession. They finished up with 60%, really pushing for the equaliser, and Genk just looking to hit on the counter-attack. And it was the counter-attack that paid off. Joseph Pencil with a lovely finish in the 91st minute after a really nice move from Genk, just basically from their own box right up to the other side. This time, I guess we're going to have a slightly different opinion. Usually we'll go straight to Joris on this to talk about his Genk side. But Scott, obviously you've got the Mechelen perspective as well. I actually thought this was another sign of Mechelen looking different under Dufour, more attacking, more going for it, up against a side that you'd have expected them to sit back against more. Obviously, it helped them kind of Genk going down to 10 men, but Genk will be probably relieved, but also quite heartened that despite adversity being down to 10 men, they were able to see this one out. And Rankin's never been the best defensive coach, but you have to say that it worked in this one. They were able to keep them out with 10 men and get the 3 points that they've just, keep getting at the moment.
Yeah, I think from Mechelen's perspective, I think they've been looking a bit better over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Actually, they've been looking a little bit more solid and a little bit more comfortable. So I think they're feeling a bit better about themselves because they're expressing themselves on the pitch better. So the change of coach, I think, has made a difference there. I think there is more of an attacking outlet. You know, something I've been moaning about since the start of the season that I feel had just kind of gone off a cliff, seems to be returning somewhat. And actually, for large chunks of this game, particularly in the first half, I thought they weren't bad at all. It's the best I've seen them, I think, this season. That they're starting to look better balanced as well, I think. And I'm kind of surprised, actually, they've reacted so positively to Steven Dufour, because my initial reaction when he came in was I wasn't sure about that. I understood the appointment, but wasn't sure about it at all. But I think the initial response has been very positive, and they've settled down somewhat. So some reasons to be optimistic for Molinma. I think on Genk's part, actually, what's interesting here is everyone will remember me asking Joris, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago now, if they could sustain this, would there be a real title challenge on? Well, they seem to have kind of accelerated past that point now. And that's coincided, obviously, with, and we'll talk about the great old good old Antwerp, who we saw in person recently at the ball. So we'll talk about them a little bit later on. But Genk's kind of acceleration really has kind of coincided with Antwerp's implosion, and we can discuss whether that's what we're witnessing there or not, kind of a little bit later on. But I think there's always been a good balance in this Genk side, and it was obvious from the moment that some of the big hitters who people thought were going to be a problem when they lost, the Bongondas and Itos of this world, that would harm them, kind of quite a lot. But the truth is, quite the opposite's been the case. The squad has settled down, has been working hard, playing exceptionally well, and the one thing they have, which I think we talked about last week, was they have a number of creative players who you can rely on to produce the goods for you, to either score or to kind of create. And this is one advantage they have over a number of sides around them at the moment. And although you can't rely on that, you have to bring your talent. I think at the moment they're looking very comfortable. They're clearly very happy together, and I think they could push Club Brugge kind of quite hard for the title this year. They're obviously going to have a downturn in form at some point, which they haven't really had yet. They've been flying apart from that opening weekend, but they're starting to lurch into a lead now, which allows them a tiny bit of wiggle room. And the one thing that will be really irritating, Frank, and I suspect, is there's a certain break coming up shortly for a rather annoying tournament that nobody seems to be looking forward to. And I think that's probably the last thing he and the Genkies want at this point in time.
Yeah, I guess you're kind of looking at it in two ways, aren't you? Like, it's a chance for them to rest some of these players and stuff, especially the wingers, where they're not as strong in depth, but the way they're playing, they probably don't want to stop playing, like you said. It's like, I was just looking at it there, goals for 39 goals in 15 games is just a little bit ridiculous. And goals against 14. So like, we belie his kind of lack of defensive kind of qualities as a coach, I guess we could say, which is what we kind of said at Mechelen, but at Genk it's definitely working, isn't it? Like 14 goals conceded in 15 games is the best in the league. Like, it's one better than Antwerp, two better than Club Brugge. They've scored 7 more goals than Club Brugge. They're just a great fun side to watch. They've got goals, they've got good defenders at the moment. Like, the fullbacks are exciting. I think I worked out Daniel Munoz is now in his best scoring season ever, and he's got 5 goals already. So
Yeah,
it just felt like a match made in heaven.
absolutely. I mean, I was just going to say that it's worth mentioning that Genk's defenders are now starting to pitch in with goals. So although the defence at Genk is obviously better than the one that Rankin had at Mechelen and Mechelen's current one, I think the fact that defenders are starting to pitch in and actually create assists now as well is a wonderful bonus for them. And there's not much for Rankin to be perplexed about at the moment. I was watching some of his body language at the weekend. I'm a big watcher of both player and coach body language. It's something that's always interested me because I think you can read a lot into that. And he looked very, very relaxed. Kind of pre-game. I think this is a coach who feels comfortable with all of the tools at his disposal, and I think they're comfortable with him. And I think there's a very good relationship has been developed between him and that squad very, very quickly, which has allowed them, apart from their defeat in the opening weekend, to kind of fly into this lead. And I think probably even he's a little bit surprised by how well things are clicking for them at the moment. And they'll certainly be enjoying the fact that some of the sides around about them, Club Brugge and Union Saint-Gilloise, have some European distractions in the mix at the moment, although they're both handling them very well, of course.
Yeah, no, that is the thing. It'll be interesting to see how that plays into account next calendar year when they win to the knockout stages, and depends who they get and how deep they can go in those competitions. Let's move on to the opposite end of the table for one side, Zoltavagem, who are now basically the only team from 10 down in the league who are still with their original manager to start the season, which is quite impressive, I guess, from Bayer to have survived for that long, but also concerning if you're in Bayer because you're looking around thinking, well, I am next. And after this result, he's probably under a little bit more pressure. They had those 2 decent results, but that's 2 back-to-back defeats. And everything happened after 80 minutes in this one, basically. 0-0 up until the 80th minute. Boston then gets called for, I can't remember who he fouled, but a foul in the box that takes VAR to intervene. Penalties given. Up steps everyone's favourite penalty taker, Noah Desen. I had to take a double take. I was like, really? But he dispatched it pretty well. Yeah, fair play to him. That gave it 1-0 to Standard. And then Nicholas Raskin started to really come into his own in this one. Lovely run from him, hit the crossbar, ball kind of drops, and Stipe Perica, who came on, makes a little bit of a meal of it, kind of like bicycle side volleys it in when he probably could have just tapped it in any sort of way. But fair play to him, he's got a goal. And then Ravi Suka gets himself sent off for Zultavara again, and at that point you're thinking the game is probably up now. And Bayer just kind of, even he looked a bit like, yeah, that's it. Raskan then goes on a ridiculously good mazy run, gets to the byline, somehow keeps the ball in, squares it across. Pradika gets his second in the 96th. 3-0, it finishes to Standard Liège. A struggle for them, I guess, to really get going this one. I mean, it took until 80 minutes. Obviously, Zultavara have been playing a lot better in recent weeks, but it's another defeat for them, and kind of it kills the momentum they'd built after the derby win against Kortrijk, whereas at least for Standard, it's back to winning ways, keeps them solidly in playoff 2, and I think that's 3 wins out of 5 matches. So, yeah, I'm sure Ronnie was very happy with that one.
Yeah, I think Mbale will be really, really irritated that they threw that away the way that they did in the last 10 minutes, kind of all things considered. I suspect, when the game had got to that point, he was thinking, okay, if we can hold out for a point, this is probably a decent result. So to throw it away so emphatically, really, in the last 10 minutes will be a bit of a sore one. And obviously kind of keeps them in, deep, deep trouble. A point actually wouldn't have been the worst result for them there, in light of other results this weekend. Interesting to see kind of Gano starting with Vossen. That's the first time that's happened this season. We've been waiting for that. I think that's probably because he's not been completely match fit, but we know how effective they can be, so they're going to need them both fully fit and playing reasonably well to give themselves any kind of a chance. So that in itself is a big positive for them, I think. I think Standard Liège are doing one of these things where they're quietly working away under the radar. Nobody's paying much attention to them, but there are, small but significant improvements in there. And actually, when you look at where they are at the moment, they really are kind of knocking on the door of a playoff 1 spot. Which is something I didn't think I was going to be able to say. Whether they're able to break into that, is going to depend on them being able to maintain something like this form. But they've shown already that they can beat the big sides, and that they probably have a bigger problem against sides that you would expect them to take all of the points off, but kind of aren't. So there's this weird thing going on where they find it very easy to motivate themselves for what on paper are certainly big games, but don't seem to bring the same performance levels against sides that they'd be expected to take the points at. And I think if they'd done that, if they'd applied themselves in the same way against some of those sides, then they probably would be in a playoff 1 spot at the moment. And actually, I think the squad's looking better. The longer term worry obviously is there's a lot of loan players in there who there are pretty big doubts as to whether they can hold on to them. So this momentum that in a way they're slowly building, the question is, how do you maintain that? That's obviously a longer question for Fergal Harkin and kind of Ronnie Dyla to sort of ponder. But all things considered, they're actually doing very well at the moment. They're feeling better about themselves, and they really are kind of in the mix of where they would want to be. They've got an interesting schedule coming up as well. I see some more points for them before the World Cup break too. So it's entirely conceivable at the moment anyway. They could actually finish in a playoff 1 spot by the time the break comes, and I think that would be pretty interesting.
I think you've hit on like a really important point there, Scott, about kind of the level against the lower teams and the top teams. And I think Ronnie Dyla did speak about this a couple of weeks ago. He's like, we're not in a position where we're good at controlling games and being the dominant possession side. He's like, we're good on the other stuff, but he's like, that's fine. Most teams can be like that. In terms of like lower level teams will be like, right, against the big teams we'll just sit in and then hit them on the counter. Like, there's just quite a standard way of playing against big teams. But he's like, we need to be able to take that next step up. And I think it's refreshing to hear him say that, because it's like, right, he's identified the issue, and that despite how well they're doing now, he knows there's an issue and they can still improve and still get better. And I think he just seems like such a good fit for them in this transition period, even though we're saying it's a transition period and we've been saying it for a little bit. But yeah, the way they're playing, and I think Raskin's already said he's happy to sign a new contract. So things are just automatically looking better just by getting a better manager, or a manager suited to the kind of setup that they've got and what they want to be happening. it's going to reap the rewards in terms of how appealing they are to players that are there and that may want to join, because that's kind of quite important for them. I think as well with Zortavagam, I think because it's not, the gap's not massive at the moment. Like it's what, a point to automatic safety, and they've got what, Mechelen and Erpen. I think if they get 4 points out of that, and Bayer's probably still there, but if they lose those two, I think they'll be like, right, we're going to cut our losses.
I think it's a very difficult one. That I think they're trying to be patient, and I actually applaud them for that, regardless, because I think that a lot of sides aren't showing much patience at the moment with their coaching decisions, and I can understand that because the stakes are much higher this year. But it's a really interesting one because I think it's such a fine line to ride this that decision making process if you're one of those sides in the mix down at the bottom. Because the thing is, we know that Circle made a change a few weeks ago, very early, which was a surprise to quite a lot of people. A lot of people felt it was too early. Carlos Avina told us that he felt that he had to make the decision early at Circle because it gave them the best chance to adjust. Because of the World Cup. And actually, if you think about the practicalities of that, he's probably right. And this applies to all of the clubs down there. I mean, we know that Serang have made a change. We'll talk about that in a little while. But I think the danger with Serang making the change now is, unless they know who's coming in, and it's a kind of, changeover that's almost immediate, which it doesn't look like it's going to be at the moment. I have a feeling that they're not entirely sure who's coming in yet. And the danger there is that when they do bring someone in, they've already lost time. You've got a break for a World Cup where, yes, you can work with players who, aren't going anywhere, but you've lost valuable working time overall with a squad. And Zulte are keeping a squad together with a coach who's been there since the start. And like you say, things are so tight down there at the moment that a couple of results can change things, quite dramatically in your favour. And obviously they're looking at it and going, okay, let's not do what everybody around us is doing. And that is panic, despite the fact there's a lot of evidence that points towards them, probably needing to make a change. So, yeah, and their recent upturn of form, a couple of wins recently, I think has kind of helped that feeling of, okay, look, let's not do what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think it's like, I think we'll talk about this as well. Like, what are your expectations going into the season? Like, you can't tell me Zortavag, we're not expecting to be in the relegation battle. Whereas we've spoken about it, obviously Carlos has spoken about it, like the Cercle of Bruges squad is better than a relegation battling team. So they shouldn't be in a relegation battle. So it's like their expectations were higher. And yeah, we'll talk about Serang, like, because I think, like, yeah, expectations are very bizarre there if they don't think that they should be in a relegation battle. Two sides that aren't in the relegation battle and have had a pretty solid season so far, Westerlo and St. Truden, and they entertained us quite well, actually. I didn't expect this one to be as entertaining as it was. Gianni Bruno got the opening goal. Eric Burkhardt with the assist squared it to Gianni Bruno to get off the mark. Him back into the starting lineup I don't know why he doesn't always start for them. He just seems to score the goals, and it's quite a strange one. Although, to be fair to Hollaback, he started all three of the kind of strikers that he trusts, Hayashi, Okazaki, and Bruno in this one, which was, yeah, very un-St. Truden-like to go so attacking. Westerlo then give away a penalty, looked as absolute stonewaller to me. It was a foul on Hayashi. Bruno stepped up and he just looked so confident. Like, the way he dispatched that penalty was, to me, was like, this is a striker who's very confident, very on his, like, happy with how he's playing at the moment. Like, it was just pure finishing, I guess you could say. Just smashed it hard, low into the bottom corner. Like, perfect penalty. And then Maxime de Kuiper decided that he didn't want to lose this one. So he got on the end of a Brian Reynolds cross. The thing I love about Westerlo is their two fullbacks massively. I love Brian Reynolds. I love Maxime de Kuiper. And I love that they can assist, like Reynolds will assist de Kuiper. Like, it's just so, I just love that. Like, he'll swing across to the back post and there's de Kuiper running in to finish it. Like, their fullbacks are so vital for how they play. Then St. Truden themselves gave away a penalty in the 83rd minute. Hollaback just looked so deflated when this happened. Up stepped de Kuiper again, much like Bruno, confidence on the ball, slotted it in to make it 2-2. And then, Literally a minute later, Daiichi Hayashi got the winning goal to make it 3-2 to St. Sluden. Bit of a mix-up at the back. Looked like it was offside. It was originally given offside, but very, very tight VAR. Looked like he then was actually onside when he looked at the replay. Finished 3-2 to St. Sluden. A very un-St. Sluden-like game, Scott. A, for them to concede two, and B, for them to score 3 goals. But a welcome win, I guess, for them, because it had been, they'd drawn and lost in a back-to-back, had a bit of an iffy last 5 games. So to get back with a win, keep themselves kind of in the hunt for playoff 2, I'm sure Hollaback will be absolutely delighted, and he looked pretty delighted.
Yeah, I think he should be as well. Signs of an upturn in form for them, and I think the main story is kind of the first point you made is back to Gianni Bruno again. I don't understand why he's not starting a bit like you, Ben. I think he's got a huge amount to contribute. We know how good he can be when he's fit and when he's playing regularly. And actually, when you think about St. Truden's kind of striking options, they're not half bad at all. And you could argue that they don't make as much of it as they could. I think Bruno offers them something different. I think for a long time they've been playing and they've been relying on supply from out wide, balls into the box that players can kind of get up into as well. And you could argue that's a little bit predictable, although it has been very effective for them. And Bruno offers them something very, very different. I had a feeling that he would prove to be a very, very good pickup for them. Very doubtful whether they're going to be able to hold on to him. I think his wages are going to be a real problem. But there might be some wiggle room for a deal to be done if things work out at the end of the season. It's kind of interesting because I think he's a player that, Ghent probably, his parent club still at the moment, probably could have made better use of, I would argue. And in a way, it's a mistake, I think, to let him go out, really, when you think about it, and the way that Ghent season's panned out a little bit. Bit of a lost opportunity there, but I'm sure there's lots of other reasons in the mix there. Particularly good result for St. Truden, I think, when you consider that Westerlo's home form has actually been really strong this season, and they've been largely reliant on that to kind of get their points, even though they've been playing okay away from home. So for St. Truden to go there and to win is a much better result, I think, than almost anybody's given them credit for this weekend. And Westerlo, some of the defending was really pretty poor. I think for this level, those that saw any of the game will saw, a couple of gifts really in a way, and I think they just switched off. But they're doing fine. They're doing fine, and I think it's just one of those that one of those fine margin games where it just kind of went against them. And I think if they can tighten a few things up, then probably they would have got something out of that game. St. Truden at the moment, hammering on a playoff 2 spot, which obviously is one of their targets. And I certainly wouldn't bet against them making playoff 2 this time, because of course they lost out on a playoff 2 spot right in the final game of last season when it looked like they were going to make it. But I have a feeling that they have a very good chance of getting in there this year.
Yeah, playoff 2's looking super competitive at the moment, because there's sides we didn't expect to be in there, in Standard, Westerlo and Leuven. Sides we probably did expect, or maybe to be in around there, Anderlecht, Ghent pushing playoff 1. Circle obviously are now kind of resurging back towards playoff 2. Charleroi, we always presume, are kind of just a staple playoff 2 side when they're not having a horrendous season, and they've obviously made the change they won. So it's like it could get quite competitive. Mechelen as well, obviously we normally consider them as a playoff 2 outfit. So I feel like there's a lot it's going to be quite tight right down to the wire for playoff 2 in terms of spots. Whereas it looks like playoff 1, like these teams, maybe we don't know what Antwerp are going to be like. I feel like they will refine some consistency eventually and maintain that playoff 1 position, but they'll probably drop a little bit. Whereas the other 3, Genk, Club Brugge and Union, they just look like the 3 best teams in the league at the moment, which I think we said last week anyway. Let's move on to one of those teams we just mentioned about wanting playoff 2, which is Cercle Brugge. They faced Kortrijk, who are in a very different situation at the very bottom of the league. And I had most of this game on, I couldn't see all of it, but from what I saw, how Cercle weren't like 7-0 up in the first half or just into the second half, I do not know. Like the efficiency that we saw in person against Charleroi was just not there. They did take the lead. Boris Popovic, really nice finish from him in the 9th minute. And they had just so many chances in this game. Both sides eventually did have quite a few chances, but I think Circle finished with 17 shots, which I'm sure they'll be going back and Milan and the team will be like, where were we not efficient? How were we not efficient in this game? And how did we not win this one?
Mm.
It was quite a nice moment in terms of the equaliser for Kortrijk. So Bilal Masouidi comes on, a player that I very wrongly predicted to have a really good season. Unfairly criticised and there was a lot of discontent amongst the Kortrijk faithful about him coming onto the pitch. Even Kustovic said he'd been quite critical about Masudi. He'd criticised him in ways and wasn't happy with the way he was playing. But then he got the equalising goal. It was a really nice finish, actually, edge of the box stuff. Obviously, pretty sure he gave the old fingers in the ears celebration, which, I mean, fair play. If people are booing you and that's what's happened, then yeah, you've got every right to do that. Lots of yellow cards flying about in this game as well. I think there's 4 for Kortrijk. Kustovic afterwards came out and criticised the fans, which I thought was very risky, given that he is in not a good position. I think I worked out they've only won 2 games, and that was a long time ago now. It feels like since that win over Antwerp feels like a long time ago. But yeah, he came out and he was really criticising them for booing, basically, Masouidi. He said, this isn't what I expect from a family club and stuff like that. And it's like, no, but the situation has got pretty bad there in terms of the way the club appears to be being run. So you can understand fan frustration. I don't like booing your own players unless they've done something horrific and you don't think they should be in the team. Like, let's say, I don't know, they've done something off the pitch that, yeah, they really shouldn't be playing and you're kind of trying to make it hurt. But for performance and stuff, I just don't think it just doesn't help the player. But I can understand Kortrijk fans' frustration with what's going on because they haven't won in 5 at least. Have things really got better under Kustovic? I don't think so. But they got the point, and it is. I think in the grand scheme of things, it is a big point for them, especially with Oostende coming up. That becomes a really big game. But I don't know, Scott. I don't know if you saw this one, but are you kind of similar? I feel like Cercle should have won this one. Kortrijk did have chances more into the second half, but yeah, I just felt like game was kind of there for the taking, and Cercle will probably be a little bit frustrated that they didn't get the win.
Yeah, I think they'll be very frustrated, actually. I think they were, on the whole, much the better side. They just couldn't quite get the game over the line. And obviously, the longer that goes on and it's still only 1-0, then, it just takes a second, for it to slip away from you. So it probably does feel like 2 points dropped. I think that, Cercle have got, when you look at their remaining fixtures before the World Cup break, they're at home to Leuven, then obviously they're at home in the Cup to Beerschot, and then they go to Steyr to play Hollerbach St Truden, which will be a quite an interesting game, I think. That's their last game before the World Cup break. That could be a really interesting kind of tactical encounter, I think. That's one to look out for on the 12th of November. That's coming up very soon. But yeah, Cercle should have been out of sight in that game, I think. It's always very easy to be hard on yourself when you should have won a game like that, when the reality is any points taken away from home are probably not a bad thing. So yeah, I think all things considered, particularly, their form has kind of seen a real upturn in recent weeks, that their disappointment will come more from that than anything else, which is kind of interesting. It just goes to show, how quickly expectations and demands can change with kind of a good period of form as well. But I think that's a good thing for any squad to be facing.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100% agree with that. Let's move on to the other Bruges side, who are currently playing Leverkusen as we speak. Currently 0-0 in that one. They absolutely laid an egg during the week against Porto. That, I think I was watching it on BT, and the commentator said if Porto could finish, this could have been 7 or 8, and he wasn't lying. Club just couldn't be asked. Fair play, they earned the right to not be asked, but they really couldn't be asked to play. They were so flat compared to how they've been in the Champions League. judging on what I've seen so far against Leverkusen, they've definitely played better.
I was just going to say, I remember saying last week to you guys that was a big worry I had with their remaining two Champions League games, that they would just kind of try and phone them in a little bit and feel like the job is done. And, that's always very, very dangerous. And we saw that against Porto.
Yeah, no, 100%. But yeah, no, I'm watching the Leverkusen game as we speak as well, and
Mm.
they definitely look more up for it in this one. That's for sure. Despite missing quite a few key players, seems they had to play poor old Dedrick Boyata again, and we're going to talk about him in this one against Oostende. Took club about 35, 34 minutes to take the lead in this one, but they eventually did. Hans van Aken rolling it past Phillips in the Oostende goal, who had a pretty decent game actually in this one. Jugler then got the second. I think Collins kind of headed a clearance up in the air, and it fell just like every kid on the playground knows. If you've been on the playground and played football, when the ball's coming down towards you and it's perfect for a volley, and your mates are just shouting you got to hit it, and he did, and he just smashed it in. It was a wonderful, wonderful finish from him. Ends like I think he's had a mini goal drought. I mean, it probably hasn't been very long, but it felt like he'd had a little bit of a goal drought. But it was nice to see him finishing again and getting back into some form. So it's 2-0 at the break, and not gonna lie, I just presumed this one was done. But then poor old Dedrick Boyata decided, you know what, let's make this one a little bit interesting. Under no pressure, really, he just plays the worst pass. And absolutely, I think you explained earlier, Scott, about Vesselo giving gifts to St. Sweden, and this was a gift for Fraser Hornby. Just played it straight to Fraser Hornby. Still had to do a little bit of work to finish, but we've seen now a couple of times actually with Fraser Hornby that when he's racing in on goal in a one-on-one situation, he's actually very composed and he's very good at finishing into the corners of the goal. So that made it 2-1. Usain then get a penalty in the 65th minute. Hornby again steps up. Absolutely no mistake. Like, again, talking about strikers looking confident from the spot, he was another one. 2-2. And if you Oostende, you can't really believe your luck at that point. You've not really had the ball. Club have had a lot of chances, but you're in the game still, thanks to Fraser Hornby. And thanks to Phillips, who had already saved, a penalty from Van Aken at that point. But they give another penalty away in the 73rd minute. Kasper Nielsen steps up. Phillips saves it again. 2 penalty saves for him. Unfortunately, it rebounds straight to Nielsen, who taps it in to make it 3-2. And then 7 minutes later, cross into the box. Poor Fanes Ketelaris gets absolutely mixed up with his feet. Phillips has no chance. 4-2, it finishes to Oostende. And that was the end of Yves van der Haag. I thought it quite strange to end it after this game. I thought he was under pressure anyway, and I didn't see him lasting the season. But of all the games, for it to finish after this one felt a little bit harsh, because it's Club Brugge. Like, what did you expect to happen? Like, they actually put in a pretty decent performance, but 1 win in 5 is probably what they're looking at more. And then expecting more from this squad, maybe. I think that's kind of what they said in the press release, was like, we expected more from this squad and we want to bring someone in to give us some more impetus. And they've already announced the new manager. Dominic Thalhammer is back. And yeah, as Scott, you pointed out to us in the WhatsApp, he takes over from Yves yet again. He's haunting him in Halloween terms, which it is kind of funny. I'm sure Yves doesn't find it funny. And I'm sure Thalhammer's like, this is a massive coincidence. But I don't know. I think looking at why Cercle brought Thalhammer in, it seems the same for me with Oostende. It's to get back to the pressing game, which is what they were so good at under Alexander Blessing. I like it as an appointment, if I'm honest. But before we get to that, let's quickly talk about the game. I guess it was another kind of Club Brugge just taking their foot off the pedal, which we've seen a couple of times already this season. I mean, the draw with Union, where they were 2-0 up and then took their foot off the pedal, literally last week, and then they did it again in this game. Worrying signs, or do you think they're always looking a bit ahead to Europe, so they're kind of relaxing in games a bit too much?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, Oostende getting back to 2-2 the way that they did, really made you think, oh, this is interesting. But Club Brugge being who they are, they have enough firepower to, when they dial it up, to be able to roll over teams, and that's kind of what happened here. Actually, Oostende got back into this game, unexpectedly, and there was enough time for them still to roll them over, which they did. I think that it's understandable. I think that they would slightly hedge their bets sometimes. I mean, I'm sure this was a game they looked at and went, "Look, we really should be winning this," kind of quite comfortably, which actually they did in the end. I think it is one of those results, a bit like the Union Saint-Gilloise game recently that we were at, where they made life a little bit difficult for themselves. By kind of taking their foot off things a little bit. They have this tendency to do that. I mean, you mentioned Diedrich Bayata, kind of with a gift, and he has that sort of that kind of gaff in him, and always has. That's not a new quality to his game, which is a shame for a player of his experience and the level that he's played at. He's played a decent amount of Champions League football in his career, so they're the sorts of things that players really shouldn't do very often. And I've seen a lot of Boyata kind of playing in person, so a lot of him during his time at Celtic, obviously, and like I was saying, it's just an element to his game that he's never quite been able to kind of iron out really, and it's just one of those things. But yeah, club just ran over the top of them really, and they'll be glad that they did, because when you're playing a side that are kind of fighting for their lives down there like Oostende are, then games and momentums can swing very easily on very small things, as we were discussing recently as well. And this game could quite easily have gotten away from club if they weren't careful, I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's the thing. They do just have enough about them. Although they didn't have Yaremchuk on the bench. And that's really interesting
Mm.
when Hoofkins came out and was like, well, we don't quite align on how we see the striker operating. He wants more of like a dynamic,
Mm.
energetic striker. And in my mind, I was kind of like, well, why did you sign Roman Yaremchuk then? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And I'm kind of like, did he want Yaremchuk?
Yeah, I think
Does he
that's,
fit
that's
into? He doesn't fit into what he wants or the system, does he?
No, I think that was a really interesting kind of take out of the last few days. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because that did immediately make me start thinking. Okay, he's not been playing, and obviously it's because of how well Jutgla has been playing. So, he's never going to get in ahead of him at the moment. But that kind of confirms there's a little bit more to it than simply that, and that maybe longer term there isn't a place for him in that squad, because he's not what he's looking for, which he's now acknowledged, Hoofkins. And even when he has been given the opportunities, he's not really set the world on fire so far, to kind of be fair. And to be fair to him as well, though, actually, he is a very different type of striker as well, who would offer them something different. And he offers them something that they don't want to do at the moment. It's just so unusual for a kind of coach to kind of come out and be as honest about that as he was. And if I was Roman Yaremchuk, obviously I'd be working away hard in the background, but I would also be starting to wonder. I don't really like that as an indication, because it means the only chance you're really going to get taken seriously and get a run is if something does happen to Jutgla, and obviously nobody at Club Brugge wants that.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we both said when they signed him, we thought it was going to be a really good signing and kind of
Mm.
gave them the edge. But then, yeah, he just really hasn't fitted into the system at all yet. So obviously there's still time for that to happen, and it'd be interesting. Yeah, if Euclid did go down, would they change the style
Mm.
up, or would they just go So and Lang?
We obviously saw a tiny bit of him. He came on as a substitute the other week at the Yusuf Marion at the game we were at, and to be blunt, you wouldn't have known he'd even come on as a substitute. He was that invisible that night. So he's just it's not working in the system. He's not working, and I don't think he's particularly happy. He does look a little bit frustrated. Back to my old body language notes again.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think as well, like, he just didn't really look. He doesn't look match fit or sharp, and I
Mm,
think he's not going to get that without playing games. And it's like, well, if he doesn't fit the system, like Erfkins is going to be like, I can't. I don't. I'm just going to give him minutes in games that we've already shown that we can kind of relapse in. Like we can't really afford that because we're chasing the title, we're chasing Champions League, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I like Yaremchuk. I like what he can offer, and we've seen him be a quality striker in the Pro League. It's just finding the right system and fit for him. But hopefully
mm.
that will work out. Let's move to Brussels then. Sunday lunchtime kickoff. Managerless Erpen, who were linked with Dominic Thalhammer. Obviously, that's not happening. Anderson is currently in charge there, and They said they kind of, before the Thalhammer stuff came out, they were kind of saying, oh, we might just stick with what we've got until after the World Cup, which I think is an interesting take because they always do left field, mostly kind of left field appointments. Stork wasn't, and it didn't work, so maybe they're going to go back to the kind of left field appointments. Anyway, Anderlecht still under Veldman, despite him not having the right coaching badges. This is always a fun topic of conversation in Belgium. Francis Amuzu gave them the lead in the 14th minute. Really nice right-footed finish from him. Leo Freyhoff then with a fantastic free kick in the 19th, finding the top corner. He was really, really good in this one. Poor old Wesley Hoot just can't catch a break. He scored an own goal in the 44th from the Steph Peters cross. I don't know how he did. I don't know what he was doing. It was all a bit bizarre from...
Neither does he.
it's just, absolute mind lapse from poor Wesley. It's just like, maybe he does need a time on the bench just to kind of like have a break from everything. So it's 2-1 at half time, but then Rafaev made it 3-1. Lovely composure from him in the box again. 65th, but then like literally 3 minutes later, gave away a pretty silly free kick. Steph Peters whips it in, and Van Kronberger just completely fluffs it into his goal. Kind of giving Open a lifeline despite them not really being in the game that much. Well, they just weren't efficient. They had 12 shots, but only 2 on target. In this one, and they just are struggling at the moment. Then came Anwar Ait El Haj. He came on, looked very, very lively. It's surprising seeing that he had scored literally the day before for the Anderlecht Futures. Again, my frustration about this whole thing, because then he scores there and then comes on and literally scores an absolute screamer in the 87th minute. And it's like, this guy should not be playing Challenger League football. Like, in some ways, it is what it's kind of there for, in the sense of it gives players like him the game time that they aren't getting. But he's good enough to be getting the game time in the top team, in the 1A team, and I think he should be getting more game time there. So finished 4-2 to Anderlecht. For Open, this was just kind of like a nothing game in the sense that there's no expectations. For Anderlecht, it ends a run of 2 straight losses, brings them back up a little bit towards playoff 2, but not massively convincing in the sense that against a struggling Open side, they're still kind of making silly mistakes, especially defensively.
This was a really interesting game. I thought it's so interesting and to watch how fragile Anderlecht are sometimes. And how they have this ability to kind of switch off and just not do really, really basic things. We know how good they can be at playing football, and sometimes, they are overly flowery and overplay it. I've said a lot about them that sometimes I just want them to put their foot through the ball. Sometimes simple football is the best thing, and they allowed Open back into this game in a way that really they shouldn't have through their own fragility. And it's things like that, momentum things like we were hinting at a moment ago. It's simple things like that, that can change things in a big way. And actually, although Anderlecht were much the better side on the whole, I wouldn't have been surprised if Open had managed to get something out of this game and it had finished 4 each, for example. A little bit more composure from them at a couple of points, and they could have got something out of this game. So Anderlecht just, obviously will be pleased to get the win. Robin Velman's first Pro League win, of course, as well, which is quite big for him personally. But you just feel that, Anderlecht, games can swing very, very quickly with them, and they're never entirely convincing. That's the thing. We've been saying that for a long, long time about them now. Big periods in games where they're actually playing very well and don't make it count, and then you think a game could turn against them, when it shouldn't. And fundamentally they're their own worst enemy sometimes. You mentioned Anur El Haj. Yeah, really. That's the second time this season that's happened with an Anderlecht player as well, to have scored in the Challenger Pro League for the under-23s, and the following day to score for the senior side, with Ait El Haj following in Julien Duranville's kind of footsteps. Really good goal from Ait El Haj, actually. He could have had a couple in this game. He missed a sitter just before he got his goal. So he'll be pleased to have kind of made up for that. Rafailov, again, we know how good he is. He's just a gorgeous footballer when he's on it, and just that free kick was just it's one of those ones that's going to come up in training videos, I think, for perfect placement, because it was just kind of gorgeous. It was very interesting to hear his halftime interview. He gave, a brief interview at halftime to 11 Sports, where he commented on the fact that they didn't adjust to open changing formation early in the first half, which I thought was kind of quite interesting, because when players go onto the pitch, they have to take all the responsibility themselves, and that includes adjustments there that they could make that coaches can't necessarily. That in this case that they didn't, and I found it really interesting that a senior player came out and said, "Well, obviously there was a shape change there in the opposition, and we didn't cope with that very well." But I think Veldman's focus very much at the moment is just about getting everybody to feel a bit better about themselves, because he knows that if he can do that, they will express themselves more effectively, play better, probably pick up more points. And I think that's all that really matters for Anderlecht at the moment, that they can just kind of settle down and try and take the pressure off themselves a little bit. Because although the boil has been lanced to a certain extent, I think everybody's just watching and waiting to see what the next big move is. And it's very, very important that they take their time with that. Equally, Eupen, I think they need to take their time, but I'm not sure they have time to take, rather ironically.
Yeah, I think it's the longer they leave it. I don't know. They're so hard to read as a club to see like what they're actually thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I completely agree on Anderlecht. I think if they can just get some kind of positivity around it, that'll be really, really important. And I think it doesn't help that they messed it up in Europe during the week with the draw to Bucharest. Like that
Mm,
was just this is a Bucharest team who'd been hammered by Siegelborg back to back. Like
yeah.
they've been absolutely battered by them. And
Yeah.
Anderlecht were basically they were in danger of going out with that point, because if Siegelborg had won against West Ham, which is
Mm,
obviously unlikely, but if they had, because West Ham had nothing to play for, then
mm,
Anderlecht could be out. But now they've got a massive game against the Danes this week, this Thursday. Basically, win or they have to win. They can't afford to draw. They have to win that game. So be interesting to see if they can kind of rally back and win that one.
It was very interesting, actually, wasn't it? Just in that European game, because our Joris, who was
Mm.
at the Lotto Park for that game, during the week, he did say to us afterwards that, they let that game get away from them, and probably should have won it. And interestingly as well, he was telling us about, there is still a little bit of toxicity around. There was some trouble in the crowd that, nobody wants to see, purely on conceding goals. They shouldn't be conceding. So the feelings are still running kind of very high there amongst the fans, and it just shows you how something like that, how important that is in the bigger picture still as well.
Yeah, I think he was mentioned a couple of the Romanian fans had got into the home end, which is, always a recipe for disaster, especially when tension is so high at the club at that time. Let's go to Union against Selang. The final game for Champs in charge of Selang ended in defeat at home because they can't win at home anyway. Dante Vanzir taking advantage of it's just a really poor back pass. I think it was from Silla back to Gali in goal. He doesn't really deal with it properly either. He doesn't rush out to get it. He just kind of waits for the ball to come. Vanzir's on him like a shot. Lovely pressing.
Mm.
He looks embarrassed when he scores it because he just takes the ball off the keeper's pass out and sticks that one in. Then Teddy Tuma, who else from the spot, makes it 2-0 to Union. And this is all in the second half. So to be fair to Solang, this is what I've seen from them this year. They will fight. They don't roll over. They did get themselves back into it. Simon Ellisor getting a goal finally. He'll be absolutely delighted. He looked pretty delighted. However, they couldn't come back. Finished 2-1 to Union. They continue their really, 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 really good form that they're on. For Solang, end of Camps. And let's just talk about that now. I mean, they've lost 3 on the bounce. They haven't won in 5 at least.
Mm.
But I don't know. I think I spoke about this on Twitter as well. I was like, what did they expect to happen this season? Like, where did they expect to be? They're a point of safety. I'd say that's pretty good. Like, considering the mess they were in at the start of the season, they barely had any players. They were taking players from a side that didn't exist anymore in 1B with Le Point. They were bringing in really old players. They were bringing in players from French B teams who only played like fourth division football. They're bringing in strikers from Mozambique, who we haven't seen much of yet, and I really do want to see him play some more. But that's what they were dealing with. That's what Jonas Jamps was given. He was given a pretty messy situation, he's won 3 games, which is more than I thought they'd win. Like, we were talking about them never winning a game, but they've been very competitive in pretty much all the games they've been in. So it beggars belief. Like, what are they expecting to happen? I thought they were one of the teams that relegation wasn't actually the end of the world for them, as long as they put up a fight. And they've been putting up a fight, and they've played pretty well. Like, some of the goals they scored, a couple of goals they scored against Wesley were really, really good goals that they managed to put together. Like, I don't know, it just feels really, really unfair. And at the moment, it looks like it's just going to be the assistant coach, Jean Sebastian Legros, who's going to take over. They haven't announced a new manager, but who would want that job at the moment if the expectations are higher than if the expectations are actually to stay up, I guess.
Yeah, it's quite a strange one, this, because you're talking about their form in recent weeks, and actually they've been playing not too bad. And when I've been looking at them, I'm thinking, okay, well, they've got a chance here. They're not playing. They've they've made some changes there that I think has given them a chance, and brought them right into the mix, because for quite a long time they were looking, they were looking gone before they'd even started, to be honest. And they managed to kind of turn that around and to start to compete. And actually, this weekend, particularly in the first half, they were much the better side. They were unlucky, had a goal chopped off correctly, unfortunately for them, pretty narrow offside margin, decent goal. I think, Union go in at half time, make some tweaks, have a right good word with themselves, come out. And I knew Union were going to be much the better side in the second half. I thought they can't play as poorly as they did in that first half again. And that turned out to be the case. Unfortunately, the game turned on another gift. A really bad back pass. Vanzier nips in. It's 1-0. And after that, I thought they're going to turn the screw here, which they did. They were obviously going to be better. But, Junsham, yeah, it's a hugely, hugely risky thing to do. And I'm not sure what their calculation actually is there, because, like you say, they are round about kind of where we would expect them to be and have given themselves a chance. And I'm not sure what the calculation is upstairs in the club that says, okay, we think we have an increased chance with a change, when, like you say, a couple of wins could change things kind of quite significantly for them in a way. So this was the one change that's come about recently that perhaps has surprised me the most. And should surprise most people. But we know that with the stakes being as they are, the panic is high, and it's definitely spreading.
Yeah, it's absolutely infectious at the moment, this panic that's going around all these clubs. But yeah,
Mm.
we'll see what happens there. But I think they're now in a worse position than they were. Just unsettles the squad a little bit. Like, they had
Yeah.
brought in some players that had been performing well, but they're still so young and so unproven that, like, could they keep it up for the whole season? And having an experienced man at the helm who was getting them playing well and was like, he was doing a good job, in my opinion. I know it's hard to say when a team's second bottom to say that he's doing a good job, but they were still in with a chance of staying up with him in charge.
I think this decision is either utter madness, like genuine panic, just causing a knee jerk reaction, or there's something more to this that only those on the inside know, which may be the case. But I certainly haven't heard anything to suggest it's anything other than pure panic, to be honest.
Yeah, again, they're kind of like Urban in the sense that it's very hard to get kind of information out of what is happening in Salang. Like, small club with not a lot kind of presence in terms of
Yeah.
what's coming out.
I mean, the Thalhammer one's much more obvious at Oostende, because it's been known for a while that there'd been a bit of discontent in the Oostende camp, and players weren't happy, and I think that's what's ultimately led to the change more than anything else. And Thalhammer's a good fit, but yeah, the Juneshop one is one that I will be pondering probably until the next episode.
Yeah, no, exactly. Quick word on Union in the sense of in Europe. They beat Malmo 2-0 and they were really comfortable in that one away from home. That means they're straight through. They're not messing around in that weird new kind of in-betweeny knockout stage. They're straight through to the next knockout stage with a game to spare. So yeah, congrats to them. They've been quality in Europe and they finished it off against Union Berlin, who can't even catch them for top spot. So I'd expect a bit of rotation there to focus on things domestically. Next game, we have another side that, laid an absolute egg in Europe almost. Um, well, they kind of did lay an egg in Europe, and that's Ghent. Horrible performance against Shamrock Rovers. I mean, I didn't realize at the time, but there was like a flu illnessy thing going through the squad, which kind of does
Mm.
explain a little bit of what was going on there because Kuipers was just. I thought he was on the bench the whole time and not coming on. I was like, "What is going on?" But he wasn't even in the kind of stadium. He was back at the hotel. The poor bloke travelled all
Mm.
the way to Ireland and then just stayed in a hotel, just chucking up at both ends. Saga apparently was also chucking up at both ends, but he was their best player in the night. Like, so I don't know how that happened. Hong as well was ill. He came on to get them the equaliser after basically they'd gone behind in within the third minute, and Shamrock going down to 10 men basically helped again kind of get back into the game. It could have easily been 2-0 to Shamrock, and they were also saved by Djurgårdens coming back from 2-0 down, I think it was, against Mulder to win 3-2, which means, like Anderlecht, Ghent have basically a must-win game against Mulder coming up this week. And they'll probably hope for a little bit of a better performance than they showed against Leuven. They did take the lead through Hugo Kuipers, who is better now. He said he had a horrendous kind of week with the illness. He'll be delighted that he got a goal and got over the illness. However, they couldn't keep hold of that, and then they gave away a penalty in the 73rd minute. Mario Gonzalez stepped up and dispatched that to get another goal for the season. And yeah, finished 1-1 between these two sides, which is probably, on kind of reflection of the game, probably was a kind of fair result. Keeps them both just solidly in playoff 2. However, for Leuven now, that's 4 games without a win, which will be a little bit frustrating, I think, for them, especially with the 2 draws that they've had. But their kind of start to the season has meant that it's not a massive, massive issue. And they've got enough, I think, in the squad. They play Circle next, and then they finish against Salang before the World Cup. So they'll probably be looking to at least get 3 points from one of those games.
I actually really enjoyed this game. I thought it was a really good, open, feisty, physical game, and they were both really having a good go at each other. And there really wasn't very much in this at all. I think Ghent sort of controlled the game, which they have a tendency to do. Sometimes without kind of getting over the line in it. But I really kind of enjoyed tactically how this game played out. And the last 20 minutes of it in particular got quite spicy in a way that I thought, oh, where's this kind of come from? Which kind of told us about, I think, more about the players' levels in this game, which was ultimately a good thing. But I thought this was a really good advert for the Pro League. This game, two sides who I think on their day can be very good. Ghent performed pretty decently, considering how undecent they were in Europe, as Ben was just describing there. So they'll probably be more pleased with this than Mark Bryce's Leuven will. But a good game, and I think a draw definitely a fair result.
Yeah, 100%, and hopefully get more than a draw during the week to get through to the next round of Europe. Let's go to the final game, which was Charleroi against Antwerp. Obviously, no still. It was Defay's in the dugout for Charleroi, and they scored a goal and they got a win. Afeth Natamir Ben Bouali got a really nice goal. We said, Joris has said it last week, and we kind of been talking about it during the circular game. We liked what we saw from Ben Bouali. Like, he had good movement, he looked comfortable on the
Mm.
ball. He just needed to find the back of the net. And he did that in this one. Really, really nice finish from him in the 35th minute. Antwerp, to be fair to them, they chucked as much as they could at Charleroi, but they just didn't have like that final ball, the final finish. 66% possession, 14 shots, only 6 on target. Failed to find the net. Herve Coffey was back in goal for Charleroi, and he made a really big save in the first half, I believe it was. Just as I've seen Mignolet make a ridiculous save again in Europe. He's just, some good goalkeepers in the Pro
Mm.
League this season, and he was obviously one of those, and he made an important save. I mean, Scott, just a really big win for Charleroi. They kind of needed it after the sacking and everything that's been going on at the club. For Antwerp, that's now 2 defeats on the bounce. Weren't really convincing. Once again, I think Van Bommel didn't really have much he could bring on to change the game, which, I'm sure will have to be rectified in the January transfer window. And just a quick note on this one, because you mentioned it to me, that both of these sides lost 2 players this summer, Benson and Zari. unfortunately for me, they were both the two players went to Burnley, and they both scored against Reading, as if to like to wind me up even more. Zari, I think it was the last minute winner in that one. It was just kind of like, of course, the two players that I know about and I've watched all last year Napoli come back to haunt me in the Championship, where I thought I was safe from them. So fair play to those two. They're playing pretty good football at the moment, and Company's doing a ridiculously good job with Burnley, even though they've got a nice budget and spent pretty well and brought in some good players. But yeah, he's still doing a decent job there. But these two sides, I think, yeah, Charleroi are definitely happy. Antwerp starting to get concerned.
Yeah, I mean, this is such an interesting one because they dominated this game. They controlled the vast majority of it, but didn't really do anything with it. I think Calvin Stengs had a couple of really pretty decent chances that he should have done better with. But it's worrying when you dominate a game as much as you do and create kind of so little. For Charleroi, it was interesting to see how much it meant for them. Actually, full time it looked like they'd won a cup final, to be honest, the way they were celebrating. So obviously it was a big release of pressure inside that camp, and it's always nice to see how much a win like that means for a side that had been kind of plummeting in lots of ways. And Antwerp simply should have got something out of this game, but just kind of didn't. Charleroi defended quite well, held on, and I just wonder, like say 2 defeats in the bounce. I think it's 4 and 6, something like that for Antwerp now, and yeah, I was asking way back at the beginning, are we seeing a bit of an implosion there? Because the dip in form has been quite marked. And when we were at the Bossel Stadion for the visit of Oostende just the other week, I was talking to some Antwerp fans, and they expressed to me that one of their long-term concerns was them not having enough creatively over the distance to kind of stay in the mix. And while I don't think they should be panicking at all about that at the moment, I think what we're starting to see is something that we talked about probably at least a month ago, and that is them just not having enough firepower out wide, and the wide men not really producing a good enough final product. And that they have been overly reliant on Michael Frey and Janssen, and that they need to do more to kind of support both of them, whatever they choose to do there. But not really great from an Antwerp perspective, and pretty frustrating. And the interesting thing is, I went away and had a look at this because I was thinking about the implosion thing. And when you look at their 3 fixtures before the World Cup break, they've got Anderlecht at home. They come to the Bossel next. There's then a very tasty cup game where they go to Beveren, which will be interesting because obviously we're going to get to see whether Michael Frey and Diamersi and Bacani get to play against their old sides, which I'm very much hoping that they will. That could be spicy. And then the last game before that break is away at the Ambridal against Club. So, some huge fixtures in there, and they don't get any easier when they come back after the break either, because their first 3 after the break are equally big. They're at home to Ghent. They then go to the Joseph Marion to play Union, and then they're away to Oostende. So I've got a very strong feeling that their next 4 or 5 league games over the course of the next month or so could be really quite defining for them. If they don't pick up a decent amount of points in there. And they're the one side in the top 4 in the playoff 1 spot that I think are the most vulnerable to kind of drop out. And if you're Ronnie Dyla, he'll be, peeking over the parapets just now, probably looking at Antwerp and thinking, yep, it's you that we're coming after, because the other sides in playoff 1 spot, I think, have plenty going on offensively in a way that Antwerp don't, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out. And Van Bommel as well, back to my old body language, Van Bommel looks like a nervous man at the moment.
Yeah, I wonder if that has anything to do with people trying to take him out of his flipping car with a gun. I mean, that was a ridiculous story.
Is it?
Attempted carjacking on Van Bommel. He just said he reversed as quick as he could and got away from that. And then he was back in training the next day. So, yeah, ridiculous. Hopefully that gets sorted and whoever's responsible gets, justice should be served. But, I mean, I literally was going to say about their next fixtures, like Anderlecht, tricky at home. The Beveren game is the SK Beveren one is just like, it is just like a potential banana skin just because of Umbakani, the way that Beveren had been playing. They like playing at home. The atmosphere should be pretty good. Frey, like it should just be a good cup fixture. But the way Antwerp are playing, I'd be concerned if I was them about that. And then club, obviously, that's going to be a big one. And I think, that could be quite a struggle for them. Let's dip into the Challenger now then. We've covered Europe, we've covered 1A. Let's quickly go to the Challenger, where obviously Beveren were playing. We've had a managerial appointment, which we'll get to, but let's quickly run through the results. So Lommel, after we saw them, we were quite disappointed with them, but they got back to winning ways. They'll be absolutely delighted, I'm sure. They went down early to Virton, but then they came back to win that one 3-1. Molenbeek, big result from them. They beat Leers, who we saw. Obviously, they beat them 3-0. Denzer beat Standard's youth team 4-1. Dender beat Club Next 3-2. Big win for Dender. Beerschot lost to Anderlecht Futures, as we already mentioned. Anderlecht had scoring there. And then SK Beveren, they beat Young Genk 3-0. Scott, over to you for everything that's been kind of going on and off the pitch in the Challenger.
Well, we already kind of highlighted earlier on that Anderlecht Sanur Etel Haj managed to score both for the under-23s against Beerschot and for the senior side this weekend. You know, again, the second Anderlecht player to have done that this season. So maybe it's something in the water at Nearpeed. I don't know. Also, Molenbeek getting a good win against Lierse, who we saw recently, Arman Yusuf Chaluk, who we like to bang the drum for because we all think he's a very good player, getting on the score sheet again. So he seems to be kind of settling in well to his loan period at Molenbeek from Kortrijk. Another goal this weekend for Dio Mercier and Bacani at Beveren as well. We thought he could prove to be a shrewd signing, and now that he's been working on his fitness, it's certainly he's certainly had a positive start to his game time. In terms of kind of the big news, obviously Denza have made a new appointment. They have a new T1. We see the return of Marc Grosjean, a 64-year-old Belgian coach who's had a number of head coach roles in Belgian football. He's had periods at Virton and Union Saint-Gilloise, Eupen and Antwerp as well. And he's been a former T2 at Serang. In terms of his Belgian roles. Most recently, actually, he was a head coach at a fourth-tier side in Belgian football. Stocke Varsfroese fans may well know Marc Grosjean, but he's certainly no stranger to kind of Belgian football, and he's had some reasonably high-profile jobs. And obviously, Denza responded very, very positively to that new appointment by thumping Standard Liège 4-1 this weekend. In terms of the bigger picture, Beveren are top, just ahead of Molenbeek, and those two are the two that I think most of us expected to be kind of going toe to toe for kind of that automatic spot. Lierse obviously still going kind of quite strong at the moment as well, and Young Genk struggling down there at the bottom. Arjoris isn't with us this week, so he can't talk about how tactically naive he's found them to be so far this season. But at the moment, we're at the halfway point, obviously, because people should know by now that there are 22 games before the playoffs kick in the Challenger Pro League, and at the moment certainly the two at the top are the two sides that we thought would be in that position, and I think will be jostling with each other probably right till the end.
Yeah, I saw someone on Twitter say that Yusuf Shaluk's a hack code or a cheat code for the Challenger. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
It's like since he's come in, that was like 4 wins on the bounce for Molenbeek, just dragged them from kind of mid-table nothingness into second place. Those two sides face each other on the 19th of November, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I think day before the World Cup as well. So what more could you want to get ready for a World Cup that a lot of people don't care about? Watch a bit Challenger. That is probably about it for the two-man show this week. Plenty happened. As always, Scott, thank you very much for joining me.
It's a pleasure. See you next week,
yes,
everyone.
We certainly will. And if you like what we do, please do leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. And as always, you can get in touch with us through the usual ways. But once again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.